All right, guys, we are talking about episode 2 of House of the Dragon, or yeah, House of the Dragon, the House of the Dragons.
House of Dragons? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know what the fuck it's called. I don't know anyone's name either. Um,
Has to be House of Dragons.
yeah, House of Dragons. We're talking about episode 2, The Rogue Prince, which I don't know why it's really called that because the Rogue Prince in the title is barely in the episode. He's in like two
The
scenes.
end?
Yeah, it's not even about him.
No. I mean, I guess he's the driving force kind of like any momentum that's in it.
Yeah, he's the catalyst for the story in this one. Yeah, but this episode's more about whether or not King Viserys is going to be a pedophile.
Yeah.
That's the premise of episode 2.
Everyone's pushing him into it.
Everybody wants him to fuck children.
Yeah.
I mean, well, so far with the show, the things that have been the darkest have been so subtly done that it makes them more disturbing, and they're both with Viserys. Like cutting the baby out, and then they just have him going on like a little date with a little girl. Now, don't get me wrong, for the time, I know this wasn't that weird, but it's weird to watch on a television show in 2022.
But I think that's the point, at least with the date with the child. They're definitely trying to imply that it's awkward for him to be discussing this stuff with her and that she's been groomed to say exactly what she's supposed to say to him.
Yeah, that part was just, I know we're jumping ahead, but that was just like the first
Yeah.
thing that popped in my head was like, you went on a date with a little girl, a little black girl too. That just made it weirder for me. I don't know because there's not black people on Game of Thrones usually. So seeing a little black girl with like white hair.
Well, I'm wondering, like, I don't know, because he's from a different bloodline. Are we gonna see a whole like different family there?
Yeah, the black Valyrians.
Black Valerians. Yeah.
That sounds badass.
Well, because I don't know, a lot of like the stuff that because he has one good monologue in it, and I think a lot of it is kind of paralleled to that sort of thing, because he's talking about they made themselves into kings, that it came from hard work. They didn't have the blood or the dragons.
We was kings.
Okay.
So we'll start with, I guess we'll start with the beginning, which I kind of don't remember very well.
I was trying to recall it and I'm like, I think it really is just they kind of jump in with who is he gonna marry?
Yeah,
There's
well,
a little bit with the daughter, and he wants to connect with the daughter about his well, they jump ahead 6 months.
yeah, that's the weird thing that I mean, it's not as jarring as it was in Game of Thrones, where like Varys would be at one location and then he would be across the sea, and it would seem like it was the next day, and you'd be like, how does that make any sense? With this, they do say in the dialogue, like, hey, it's been 6 months. And I didn't know this before watching the show. Apparently, there's going to be a time jump that's several years ahead, and the I think her name's Regara.
Yeah.
She's going to be played by another actress playing the older version of her at some point. So the younger actress, we've been saying they're gonna have her be an adult here in the next like episode or two. So I'm trying to adjust to that too. There's like a lot of story happening, but it's like jumping time.
Yeah, they're not spending time like original Game of Thrones. They're not spending time developing a lot of it. They're just trying to jump through all this. I'm assuming they want to get to that point where, yeah, she's actually an adult, not a teenage girl. So they're trying to set up all this plot with who her father remarries, and I'm going to assume an heir.
Well, I mean, I'm conflicted. I don't know how I feel because I liked episode 1 and I like this episode. And this is a
Yeah.
much slower episode. This is like, a character building episode. This isn't an action episode. We don't have a tournament. We don't have the conflict. We don't have like the scene where Damon's going and killing people in King's Landing that are criminals.
There's no comedy again.
Yeah, there's one scene that's kind of funny that we'll
Yeah.
get to. There's one scene that I think is probably the best scene of the episode too. It's kind of the standout moment of this episode and so far of the show. But really, the majority of this episode if the first episode was doing a lot of like world building and kind of setting up the atmosphere, this episode is trying to show you the character motivation. So a lot of our theories for the previous week, I think, came to fruition here. Um, Obviously, Otto Hightower is up to some shenanigans. He's the Tywin, I would say, of the show right now. It seemed like he was trying to pimp his daughter out to manipulate the king to get with her on some level. This episode definitely confirms that's what he was doing.
Yeah.
There's no question about it. It also makes you flip on a few things. You leave the first episode thinking that Damon's probably bad, but now I think what Damon was saying to his brother, um, there was some truth to it because obviously Otto Hightower is up to no good. There was somebody who told me in a comment on our last video that they thought that Otto might have even had the Maester kill the baby in the first episode. And I do think that the Maester and Otto are in cahoots with each other.
Oh, yeah.
And the king's disease or whatever's happening with his skin, I think from the throne, he's getting cut, but he's clearly going to die from that or something. They've been showing it too much.
Yeah. Well, because he's going through treatments, they're putting what they put maggots on
Yeah, he
it.
sticks his hand in like a bowl of maggots. Um, so that part was fun, and this was the episode where it became more like the game of the Game of Thrones.
Yeah, you're seeing the politics come out.
Yeah, and the characters, particularly not just Otto, but I can't I his name just slips me right now, but the black guy with the white hair from Valyria. Um, the two of them kind of battling to get a status with the king who's weak right now. You
Well,
know,
through their daughters too, you know? They only can get the claim by using their daughters. You know, even though the woman's not allowed to rule, the woman is still gonna be a line to power for them.
well, the so this episode, it like I said, it is slower, but I did like it. I did like that element of it because there was a little bit more character stuff that I thought the first one was lacking. I I guess we'll get to some stuff before we get to like the big scenes, and then we can just kind of wrap it up and say how we feel. Because I really don't think there's too much to break down in this episode. I think it went by a lot more tightly than the first one did. It didn't feel as long.
It was a nice watch. Yeah.
Um, so the character I think benefited the most from this episode, and the one that I think is showing the most complexity is definitely King Viserys. Is where I'm at right now with the show. He's he's definitely the most good person on the show, but the fact that he's not perverted about the sexuality with with his daughter's friend, the fact that he's conflicted about the decisions he has to make, the fact that he's conflicted about the relationship with his daughter. I think that point you brought up on the last video about he was thinking about his daughter when talking to her friend. I think there's some truth to that. I think and those scenes are the more interesting scenes when he's with her and they're talking because you don't know if she's so nervous about it that she doesn't want to do this and she's just being pushed by her father, or if she is starting to get feelings for the king.
Well, because there was that one scene that it was like weird when I think her father was going away to go talk to Damon, and I don't think he knew that she was with the king at the moment, but he went into the king's chambers and it was like this awkward thing once the king left because he was calling him to court. And the father and the daughter just kind of had this weird like look at each other. I'm still not sure what to make of that.
Yeah, I have two big complaints with this episode revolving around that is whenever she's in the room during something like well, I guess we'll get to the end part and talk about that. So really a lot of this episode is people talking like, why won't my father talk to me? Why don't you talk to your daughter? And it's like going through these other conversations. And then the subplot that's happening is people trying to make moves with the king to marry their children. And that's a big chunk of this episode. We spent a lot of time on that. And you I honestly kind of felt like I knew where it was going, that he wasn't gonna get with the 12-year-old and he was gonna go with the Hightower girl. I thought because they kind of been setting it up. And they're just moving the story so fast. Like I wouldn't be shocked if Viserys is dead in the next episode. Like we just jump ahead.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't be shocked if she's pregnant with a baby and Viserys is dying and she's the queen and has a new heir. I wouldn't be sure because I think She has Aegon Targaryen. I'm pretty sure that's who.
Oh.
Yeah, so I think we're getting into, like, yeah, the big lore coming up soon because apparently the story from what I've read spans, like, 20 plus years to where you get
Wow.
to the Dance of the Dragon, so that might be why they're moving so fast because apparently we're gonna be jumping ahead even further in time with these characters and the storyline with the Targaryens.
Yeah.
So I would say I'm mixed on it, but I genuinely think that sort of pacing, which I didn't like in the later seasons of Game of Thrones, because the show's starting this way, and it's sort of doing it like a historical documentation of this thing that happened. For the most part, it works for me. I still think it's a little bit logistically like, okay, what day is this happening on, and who's where? It's
It's
like,
kinda like when you were in high school in, like, history class and you're like, "Wait, we covered, like, a century in a week. I don't know when things happened."
well, like Damon sends the letter about him getting married to the whore, and he's gonna have the kid, and
Yeah,
then
and then they just, like, materialize right there.
and I know Dragonstone's close to King's Landing. Like
Yeah.
it's right beside it basically, but it does feel like it was like, well, how long was this journey? Was it a few hours? I mean, it just feels like Otto's there the next day
Yeah.
and it's just like I get when she shows up with the dragon, it's like she flew so she
I'm
could
trying to
get there.
remember. They don't even have a conversation on the way over, like old Game of Thrones would have had, like, a little bit of, like, character building and conversation between people on a journey to somewhere. Did they
No, they just jumped to Otto and
Okay, yeah,
the
so they
men.
they really wasted that opportunity because that whole journey could have been even if it is just, like, okay, a few days march to Dragonstone, there could have been a lot of conversation or even, I don't know, some comedy for levity in there.
Yeah, somebody was arguing with me about this, was saying that Game of Thrones had dark humor, and this show also has dark humor. So I just sent them a bunch of clips of Robert Baratheon talking about like boobs and asses and talking about being fat and like I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like Braun, Tyrion, Robert, all were very funny. They weren't always dark.
Tyrion was the levity.
Yeah, no, the show really does not have a funny character. None of the actors
No.
are
I mean, Damon, he's funny in this very dry, serious way, like, the
yes.
things he says are funny and the delivery makes it good, but it's still just but I don't know, that might be what they're trying to make, like, the Valerian and the Targaryens and that maybe they are just, like, staunch, serious. But in that case, I don't know, maybe the Dornish guy can be funny? Can
Well,
we
no
make him
well,
funny?
not everyone's Valyrian though, and not everyone's Targaryen. So, like, why can't somebody in the High Council be funny? Why can't I'm just saying. I'm not saying the show needs comedy, but like,
It could use a bit.
I don't think the drama and the tension's quite high enough to get away with the lack of comedy. Um, So, and also, it's just a good rule of thumb when you're making something like this to kind of have that balance between the two things. I mean, Harry Potter does it, Star Wars does it, Lord of the Rings has lots of comedy.
Well, how do you flesh out a character without adding a little bit of comedy? I mean, people laugh throughout their life. If you're just serious all the time, I mean, I don't know. I guess I haven't met that person.
Well, haven't met where everybody's that way.
Yeah, it's this weird. I'm like, I know that, maybe things aren't so nice and times are tough there or whatever, but I don't know. I find it hard to believe people wouldn't be joking around and laughing, especially like, okay, two young girls hanging out together and they're just so serious all the time. I don't buy that.
Yeah, they never,
They're
nobody,
teenage girls, they'd be laughing.
nobody's ever having fun. That's a big issue. There's never any fun. I mean, there's moments like when he's walking with the little girl the first time, it's kind of funny, like, oh, she really is a kid. There's things like that.
Or you get the girls, like, with the guy, and they're like, "Oh, he's
Yeah,
Dornish."
the cute guy. Yeah, and because that's a big scene where she picks who's gonna
Yeah.
be, the main knight of the Night's Watch.
Yeah, because
And
he gets a little bit of time in this episode, too.
yeah, and that guy has something about him, the actor, and I'm curious to see because him and Damon have some shit between each other, and I think that's gonna come out to play at some point. Like they're gonna have a rematch or something. And I think the only funny moment in the episode is between those two. Um, So a lot of it's her like
Yeah.
trying to be the queen and intersecting with things her father kind of not giving. I would say the theme of this episode is communication and a lack of communication between people. It's people handling a situation bad. The father's not communicating with the daughter clearly enough. She's not talking to him clearly enough. Everybody who's scheming isn't being clear with their intentions. And by the end, I would say King Viserys handles this situation horribly. Like,
Yeah.
that would be my biggest complaint. I like him as a character, I think he's a good guy. I don't think of him as stupid, but I think what he does at the end here, it's not necessarily what he does, how he does it is so stupid, it makes no sense to me, like
It's abrupt.
but let's just jump to the big scene that's gonna be the one everyone's gonna talk about because it is the and obviously because it's a Damon scene. So Damon sends a letter saying he's getting married, that he's going to have a baby. He's taken over Dragonstone for 6 months. He took a bunch of gold cloaks with him. The king's going to go confront him. Otto says, like, no, it's too dangerous. Let me go. So then we get the cut to Otto being there. This scene is pretty good. Like, this is pretty high level stuff for this show so far. And I hope there's more scenes like this because immediately when they get there, tension builds. I legitimately thought shit was gonna go down. Like, I was
Mhm.
waiting for it. I mean, it because the 2 characters that have the most going on are Otto and Damon, and
Yeah.
they're just looking at each other, they're talking trash. Damon has that thing with the guy, he's like, "I knocked you off your horse," and he's like, "Oh, that's very good." Um, and that was so on like, Matt Smith is doing a great job as Damon, even when he does nothing, he's entertaining. Um, but
And he
man,
really leaves it on the court.
but the buildup of that sequence, like, and the fact that Damon's just being like a petulant child, he really just wants his brother's attention. He just made the whole thing up. Like I guess in the book this happened, but in the show it's interesting. Damon just makes it up. She's not pregnant. She gets mad at him for even saying
Says
this.
she never wanted to bear children and all that. She doesn't want fear of childbirth and
Yeah, no, the whole sequence is like the closest I would say so far to like a Game of Thrones tension moment. It's like I legitimately thought violent. I was like, because they're jumping ahead. I'm like, I could totally see Damon just killing these guys here right now. And the dragon shows up. His dragon shows up. His insane heavy metal dragon with the long neck and everything. Um,
yeah, why was that dragon so different?
yeah, I can't even wrap my head around like how does it even function with a neck like that and everything. Like for
Well, the
me,
the body, it looked like a praying mantis or
well,
something.
I know George Martin, like he tried to be as realistic as possible with things in Game of Thrones. So there's a reason why like the dragon's wings are the way they are because in a lot of depictions in fantasy like they show dragons with 4 legs and then they have wings, but in Game of Thrones they're wings and then they have 2 legs like a bird. um so I
Or
always thought
a
that
bat.
the dragons physically looked pretty realistic in Game of Thrones. This dragon, I'm like, I mean, it looks cool, but I'm also sitting there like that does not look like it could exist at all. That does not look possible to me. Like the way its body is designed. I'm like, how does this thing function? It's got a giraffe neck and a lizard body, and then like its proportion. It's like they designed it to look cool instead of practical.
I
But
don't
then
know. Yeah, it was very insect. Insect is what I keep thinking with it. Just
but then she shows up with her dragon, and she has a scene where the dragon in the clouds, and it's pretty badass. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, once again, it's a little bit like Danny always showing up to save the day kind of crap that was annoying in Game of Thrones, but that shot is cool. Her,
well, this made sense. It's her uncle and she's close with him. She's like, I don't want anyone getting hurt. I'm going.
well, the fact too that the dragon egg was the dragon egg that was supposed to be for the baby brother,
Yes.
because so there's that relationship dynamic. I thought the scene with the two of them talking in the Valyrian with the subtitles was the best moment of the show so far, both episodes. I think for some reason it's so much better when they talk as subtitles. It was the same way with Emil Clark when she played Danny. It was better when there were subtitles because her acting seemed less cringy. Um, but man, the conversation they have and kind of the way she gets the egg back and he throws it back at her, even though it's like pretty predictable dialogue. She's like, "Well, you're gonna have to kill me if you wanted, if you want to end this and
Well, because
stuff."
she just called him out on his shit. She's like, you're just trying to get my dad's attention.
Yes,
This is ridiculous.
that was very fun.
Yeah.
That was very fun. After all the tension to kind of end on a moment
And
like that.
he plays it up like a pouting child. Like,
Yes. No, the shot of him throwing the egg back and just being like, "Here, fuck it."
I almost wish that it wasn't the king's brother. I wish it was like her big brother that did something that got him banished and like him and the father have a beef. So he's trying to replace him as an heir, but I get it being the brother. It just makes more sense, like the second born son
Well,
thing.
that's the thing, because if he was the son, he would have complete rights to the throne,
No,
and the father would have no validity.
I'm just saying have something that he did that was unforgivable, you know?
Oh, I agree. A brother or sister dynamic would be very
That's what
interesting.
they have. Like they act like a brother and sister, not an uncle and,
Niece,
niece.
yeah.
Cuz yeah, the first episode it seemed very incestuous.
And then they just drop that scene where he puts the necklace on her and it's kind of sexual. That they don't seem to have that anymore.
Yeah, I mean maybe it was just kind of a weird moment.
Well, I think maybe the writers are kind of changing things as they go or something. I don't know. Like I'm enjoying all of it, but I'm
Well,
still kind of confused about certain things that they're doing at this point.
well, I know that like that group of people is supposed to be incestuous, but maybe they didn't want to go full bore into that now in 2022.
Well, we still don't know that though. If they do a time jump, because I really don't know where the show's going. I don't know where Damon's
Yeah.
relationship where his niece is going to end up. I don't know, because I know the Targaryens aren't going to fall in this. They don't fall until Robert's rebellion in Game of Thrones, which predates right before Game of Thrones. So I know that the Targaryens like aren't going to. They're going to have the Dance of Dragons, and there's not going to be any more dragons. But they're not going to kill off the Targaryens at the end of the show.
Right.
So the Targaryens are going to win. It's just which Targaryens win and who ends up living. I mean, obviously, King Viserys is going to die. But like Otto Hightower, what happens to his character? What happens to his daughter? What happens to the guy from
Oh,
Valyria
I
and the queen that never was, who
well
I think is a
if
very good
he's
character?
if he's marrying the daughter of the Hightower, she's dead.
Well, I
She's so dead.
a character I think has been underutilized so far, and I think she had a great scene as the queen who never was,
Oh
is the
yeah.
conversation she has with her about, things won't change, women, I never got the chance. And then her throwing it back at her, it's like, no, you just weren't accepted because you weren't good enough. I'm better than you. And that stuff was interesting. There was some interesting moments in this that I don't think episode one had where it's like, oh, these people.
Yeah, they definitely built more tension and the girl's getting feistier with people. She's tired of being looked past and looked over.
I thought the girl came across a lot better here, a lot less bland.
Yes.
Um, a lot more of a personality was kind of formed. I kind of think they could have handled some of the scenes with her and her dad better. It's just sort of like, why the fuck can you guys not have like a normal conversation?
God,
This
they
is.
have it's like the actors have no chemistry, so they don't know how to write a scene with
It
them.
does feel like those two in particular
But
don't have chemistry.
honestly, that's not that unreal from like the teenage daughter experience being around your dad. You're like, because
Yeah.
you're a whole new person, and your dad has no clue. He's like, I don't know this character.
Yeah, he has that line where he says, I didn't notice in my daughter had become a woman.
Yeah.
Um, which I thought was really good. But that scene at the bridge,
Well, I liked that on the one wide shot that they had, you got to see the size difference between her young dragon and then his like older. Because I'm assuming that's the dragon that was in his cradle.
they're probably well. They even beyond that, some of these dragons, they could be even 100 years old. Drogon was like a baby.
Yeah.
Like the dragons live for hundreds of years. So like Viserys at one point talks about the dragon that he only got to ride one point that went off,
Yes.
and that dragon's very old. Now that dragon's definitely showing up at some point.
Oh yeah.
Um,
She's living off of the river somewhere.
yeah. So we could be thinking there could be a dragon that shows up that's way bigger than any dragon. Because
Hey,
I
I
don't.
want to see that.
Because as far as I know, I don't think they stop growing. I think that's the mythology. I think they
Well,
grow for their whole lives.
back in Game of Thrones, they talk about, dragons would black out a whole town.
Yeah, and that they apparently were so big at one point, and then when they all died off, none of the dragons were able to be that big, and they were weaker.
Well, you see the one's head, that skull keeps showing up throughout everything, but yeah, I mean, if that's just the head, that's like the size of their dragons.
Yeah, so I'm thinking I wish I could remember that dragon's name he was talking about. The episodes go by kind of fast, so it's hard to get all the information and I don't kind of look it up after. I will say that is a thing, like after Game of Thrones, I started to very quickly know characters' names and know what I was into. And this one, the people's names aren't jumping out, and it might be because
Well,
they reused too many. Like I know Otto Hightower because Otto stands out to me because I haven't heard that name in the shows, But like King Viserys, I'm like, okay, well Viserys was the asshole brother of Danny. Um, Damon. I mean, I don't
what was
know.
the one? There was a Stark that they. Oh, no, it's the first Stark boy. Not Anyway, they directly reused Recon
Recon
Stark,
Stark, yeah.
and I was like, "Are you joking?"
Well, I'm hoping at some point they are willing to branch out and cut to other storylines. Like
Mhm.
I would like to see the North, even if it's just for a little while, or I would like to go to another or Dorne or something
Well,
and
that
just kind of
Dorne was the big one I talked about. I want to see like what is it like in Dorne because even Game of Thrones barely touches on it, and they're fascinating.
Yeah, and they really screwed up Dorne in Game of Thrones, so it'd be cool to see. Yeah, that's the thing because part of the appeal of Game of Thrones was jumping around to different storylines. In this show, I think one reason it kind of suffers from some of the time jump stuff is it's one story. Like in Game of Thrones, they would have cut away to other storylines. So then when we cut back to Otto going to confront Damon, you could have said, "Oh, well, time passed. We were at this other storyline,"
Mhm.
but they can't do that on this show. So they're kind of in like a I would have. I mean, honestly, if it was me, I would have slowed things down even more. I would have spent more time on all of this stuff because I do think it's all interesting.
Yeah, as long as you're using it to develop. Like if you're just dragging it out, that's not the point of it. But yeah, they should have these meaningful conversations in between. Those conversations will make you fall in love with the character, and that's how you end up remembering them. Like you jump into Game of Thrones, you immediately love Ned Stark because of how he talks to people and how he handles things and he's raising his kids and I mean, sadly you don't get to love him for long, but
Yeah, no, well, that's the thing. You immediately love the Stark family. I mean,
yeah.
the kids and the and you realize you're never going to see them. I mean, once you watch the show, I mean, we when we watched it and you hadn't seen it, I was like getting emotional. I was like, God, this is the only time they're all together.
Yeah.
Like, after this first episode, they're never back together again or people die off. And when you watch Game of Thrones originally, what was so rewarding is when the Stark kids did meet up again at some point. You waited so long for that. This show's not gonna really have anything like that, I think. I don't think we're gonna have those emotional relationships building over time just by the way it's done.
It just doesn't seem like anyone's very close. She's not close with her father. She's kind of close with her uncle, but now there's this divide between them. And, the father, I don't, he says he loved the mother, but I don't know. He kind of treated her like property, but,
Yeah, is that gonna come up? The fact that he cut the mother
I think
open?
so because
Yeah.
they focus so heavily on him not having communication and not knowing how to talk to his daughter. I don't see how, she's gonna find out.
You would think that that's gonna become a big revelation at some point, that he did that. That he made that decision and the daughter's not gonna be happy about it.
But then again, there were only a couple people in the room, and I think only two of them walked out.
Yeah, I'm Oh, let's talk about the opening real quick. So they use the same song
Yeah.
where they just like the producers are like, "Well, we can't do." I mean,
Like, it's kind of cool to be reminiscent for a while, but well, because I remember with when I think it was the ending of the first episode, they had kind of a spin-off of the Game of Thrones theme. You could hear tones of it, but it wasn't the direct theme. And then this episode, they just
well,
blast you with the Game
I
of
mean,
Thrones.
I get it, but it felt lazy, and that's been a lot of the production stuff in the show for me. It's like I like how the show looks, I like the actors, I like the characters, but it's like they're not showing me much new stuff. And then even the opening, it's like you're going through this blood channel, reminding me of like a Sweeney Todd Tim Burton opening, or like because in the Game of Thrones, they were like, "Here's the map, here's new locations,"
Yeah.
and you wanted to watch it every week because it was really important to know where you were
Mm.
every week when you watched that show. I remember especially like when it was on. Our cat's meowing in the background, our little dragon. But I remember it back when it was on weekly, it was a big deal to see the opening because it kinda like it was like you were getting sucked back into Westeros every week, you know?
Yeah.
And then by the end, you were like, "Okay, let's go." This opening, it was like it was visually well designed, and thematically, I get what they're saying about, like, the bloodlines and everything, but it just wasn't as striking and using the same music. I was really excited about the show to hear new compositions, and they're just reusing a lot of the same music, which
So to sum it up, they're reusing names, they're reusing the music. They're not doing a whole lot.
well, this reminds me, this is very similar. What I was thinking with this episode, this just reminds me of, and you probably haven't seen either one of these, but there was the HBO miniseries Band of Brothers that Spielberg and them did about World War II, and it was a big deal, and everybody loved it. And then years later, they did the Pacific,
Mm,
and the Pacific was like them doing the Pacific War instead of like, it
yeah,
was so, but it was like it was kind of similar, but it was more scattershot, it was more rushed, but it had these production values and it was good, but it wasn't Band of Brothers. And uh, I'm getting a lot of these vibes with this. This is like very HBO miniseries to me.
just like trying to milk it.
Well, yeah, they're trying to milk it, but it's got that HBO quality.
Right,
It's
right.
better produced and better
Sure.
acted than it was
No, it,
super.
it still looks great. It's still fun to watch. I'm not shitting on
It's
it.
not bad. That's the best thing so far I can say is that it's
Yeah.
not bad because I thought this was gonna be, like, possibly a disaster.
Well, I think that's the thing is we're coming in like, whew.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this isn't She-Hulk, it isn't, I mean, it isn't, Moon Knight or Miss or Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yeah.
Like, this is like, if Obi-Wan Kenobi or any of those shows had been as good as this show, I'd be fucking happy as shit right now. That's the thing, I wonder if my standards have just been
Yeah, I don't know.
'cause
I was so very excited to see a dragon again because I knew it was gonna look cool. So
Yeah, well, that's the thing too, they're like the show's kind of. Because a lot of the people I see praising this, it just feels kind of normy. They're like, it's reminding me of how Game of Thrones used to be, or like, oh, I love the dragons. And I'm like, man, that wasn't what Game of Thrones. I mean, that's what Game of Thrones did become about, but it wasn't what Game of Thrones was about, originally.
I'm I'll be honest, for what the title of this is, I'm very underwhelmed by the use of dragons.
Yeah, I think there'll be
Shouldn't they
more.
have little baby dragons running around like puppies?
I don't think they have a lot of dragons.
Yeah, well, because we don't even know. We barely get to know about what's going on. They're clearly like trying to hatch them because they have the eggs. But then what's the whole thing with it having to be in the crib with them? And like does each one get a dragon that's royalty and no one else gets a dragon? That's not fair.
I'm sure this is lore book stuff, but in the show, I don't think it's very clearly explained. Yeah. I shouldn't have to read the book to understand like how the drag. Well, let's just we've been going a little bit long. Let's just jump to where we get to.
Yeah.
So this is my biggest issue with this episode is King Viserys' decision. It's not his decision to like, okay, I'm gonna bang my daughter's 17-year-old friend and get because everyone's been pressuring the whole episode, like, you gotta have a kid, you gotta have a kid. He's basically being pushed by everyone, and I don't know if he would have done this otherwise. Um Maybe he's been sleeping with her off camera. We've never seen them do anything together.
It's not heavily implied. It seems like they're hanging out.
Yeah, it is weird. It's like
It's like they're dating and they haven't,
yes, it
made the
does,
plunge yet.
which is interesting. You know,
Yeah, that he actually likes her.
yeah, that
He's
part.
grown fond of her.
But I just don't know why he would hold a meeting, have her there. Why
Yeah.
is she at the council meeting standing by her father? And then he announces to everybody after all of the conflict, I'm doing this. Why didn't he take the one guy off to the side first and say, hey, listen, I respect you and your family. I'm not going to marry your daughter. I'm sorry. I wanted to tell you man to man before this happens.
Yeah, he humiliates this
He
man.
doesn't tell his daughter.
Yeah.
He looks at her like he's shocked that she leaves the room. It's like, dude, you're fucking your daughter's best friend. Like, he just makes him look like an idiot. It's like a Ned Stark moment. It's like, don't trust me. I'm Littlefinger. And Ned's like, well, I better trust this guy who told me not to trust him.
Well,
and then
and
he tries to kill him.
little does he know that she had just had this conversation with her friend at the whatever that altar was.
Oh, that makes that scene so fucked up in retrospect,
Yeah.
because
She's
about the
like, "You need."
mother.
Yes. All of
Yeah.
the stuff she's bonding with her meanwhile she's stepping into that same
That
spot.
was another good scene, I forgot about that, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a very touching scene. Well, cuz I you want to feel the betrayal that she feels, but it's like, I don't know, you don't really have an idea of how close they are as friends because they're I don't know, yeah, they don't really seem to go have fun or
Well,
anything.
the
They
show's so
just
plot focused that you don't get those character
yeah.
beats. We get to see her laying her head in her lap once, and they talk a couple
Well,
times.
at first I thought, okay, these two girls are like going to be lesbians together and
Yeah,
it's
with Rayon, I don't even know what she wants. I don't know if she's attracted to her uncle. I don't know if she's a
the
lesbian.
Dornish guy, like who's she into? Everyone? She can probably have her pick.
I mean, I'm cool with that if she's just like, that was one thing that was fun about Danny, is she liked to fuck.
Yeah,
And
she wasn't shy
she
about it.
just picked dudes. She was like, "You're my guy now," and then she would flirt with Missandei and
Well,
stuff.
she acted like how a king would. He's like, I don't care if you're a common whore. I like you. I'm
Yeah,
gonna.
and it was cool to see a woman like that in a show
Yeah.
where
She's
she's,
like, I don't care what your station is. You're hot.
um, but yeah, I just don't know why. You think just common sense he would know to handle this differently, because him making that decision has ramifications. But I think if he had handled it better,
Well, up until this point, he has good diplomacy, so I just don't understand.
well, why is she even at the meet? Like, what I don't get is
Yeah,
like,
she's not part of the council, so I don't. She shouldn't be in on
it
the
felt like it was
information.
just set up so her and the daughter could have the stare down, and then
Yeah.
Otto could look at the other guy and give him that shit eating grin,
Yeah.
and it was all done. So that made it feel very set up. Like, I'm not saying it's not effective, but I think it could have been more effective. Um, where I mean, I don't know. It's just I
It
like
was just a poorly done scene in those ways.
yes, kind of the geography of why everybody got matched up in that way was not.
Well, it just
It could have been done better.
it's not a logical plan of action that most people would take, and he's shown good decision making up until then. It's just not in his character.
Yeah, that was my biggest issue, is the way that he communicates with his daughter, and then the way that he executes that scene. It's like, okay, dude, like, this is something that you should be like handling between a dozen people. You shouldn't just announce this to everybody, especially with the tension at the moment.
Well, he just I mean, he totally humiliates that guy.
Yeah, no, it's insane. Like, and he knows he's been given advice from everybody not to do this.
Well, every that's the thing. Everyone on his council, including the girl's father, had said it was a no-brainer. You have to marry the girl of the bloodline.
But Otto does the scene where he's like, "Oh, I didn't want to
I
move
would
on after my wife." That's the Tywin stuff.
exactly like I don't envy you.
I'm rooting for Hightower. I'll just say it right now. He's my guy. I
No.
I like I like that he's just shitty and just like, well, he's the only character that feels like a Game of Thrones character. You know what I mean? Like,
I
he's.
just always like the agent of chaos. I'm Damon all the
I mean,
way.
Damon's the best character on the show.
Now let
There's
me
no
see Damon
question.
be the like original Mad King because that's what I want.
Damon's the most fun thing on the show by far. Without Damon, the show would
I don't
be
know. I mean,
boring.
he won me over. It was gory and all, but he's like, "Hey, that's a rapist. We're gonna cut his junk off." Yeah, man, get him.
Yeah, it's weird that they try to make it like Damon's like bad and he just killed a bunch of
He was
rapists and
just he was
criminals.
just being a vigilante essentially. He didn't even kill most people. He was
He
okay.
was being the Punisher.
Well, like I mean, because he was being really harsh. Like, stealing is bad. Should you lose a hand for it? I don't think
Yeah, what was
so.
with this Islamic law about
Well, that's
stealing?
he brought Shrill up.
Yeah, Sharia law.
He just brought it down on them.
Um, I will say that, okay, so there's this thing about the Crab King, and there's an opening
Yeah,
scene, and it's like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I mean,
yeah.
it's serial. It reminded me of True Detective. There's a serial killer they go after Reggie Ledoux. It had those vibes. Like, it's genuinely like something Game of Thrones didn't do very often. Like, this guy's fucking scary looking, and what they're doing is freaky. It's like he feeds people to
Oh,
crabs.
it's horrifying. He
Like,
he like not crucifies them, but nails them to
yeah.
posts.
No, and it's I want more of that, because there's really been a lack of gore. so far.
That's true. For
And that was like immediately visceral. So there's a last conversation once again. So Damon, it's like, okay, he got invited to have a meeting. So we're like kind of jumping around a little bit again. But him and the guy with the talk, this is the best scene with the Valyrian guy.
mhm.
Him in the chair. This is like some Sopranos, Godfather stuff where he's talking about legacy. We are the brothers of kings who have been forgotten. You and I are very similar. And he kind of talks shit about Viserys, and then Damon's like, only I could talk about my brother.
Yeah. No, it gives him this whole layer
Yeah,
of
yeah, that scene's also very good. And then there's this final sequence where he talks about going to. He's like, "This is your statement. You can go handle the Crab King, and you can go handle Mr. Krabs, and this will say."
Mr.
This will
Krabs.
save that. This will like state your claim a little bit better. So the machines are starting to moving. He's starting to help Damon now to like pull a coup on the king while the king's going to have a new baby. And Hightower is now in a position of power, knowing of the king's medical condition, by the way, more than anyone else.
Yes,
So
very.
Hightower really seems like the villain more than anyone, and he's played the king very well because Viserys is susceptible to things. But the way they did that cross-cutting thing in the first episode, the way that they're trying to do the style, there's this the final conversation. They're cutting to the Crab King like in a flash forward, I guess, which is the
Mhm.
beginning would be a flash forward, but we didn't realize it at the time. And then Damon's like turning his head at the fireplace, and then you just see the face of the crab guy, and then in the background in the clouds, you see like something fly by. And I was like, "Fuck."
Yeah.
Like, that was cool. That was like a hype moment for the show.
Well, because that's a great leave off for them.
Yeah. Well, because now I'm excited. Like, this episode, I kinda came in like, "Okay, what's gonna happen?" It didn't leave me with one feeling or the other from last week. I'm genuinely excited next week now to see Damon go and just kill the fuck out of these crab people.
Yeah.
Because we just haven't got I hope it doesn't have a lot of that jump cutting and stuff they did in the tournament in the first episode. I really didn't like a lot of the action directing,
Yeah.
but they have different directors doing different episodes. So,
Well, this will just be good because we need something to spark some sort of political
yes,
tension between.
we need an action scene. I don't think Game of
Yeah.
Thrones I liked it when it wasn't an action show, but this show at this point, I mean, you need to see a like you said, it's called House of the Dragon. We need to see Damon flying on a dragon,
I
burning
want to see what
people.
they can do because, like you said, all of Danny's dragons were babies. We have not got to see a full fledged dragon in all its glory. You know, they did a lot with bringing the dragons in Game of Thrones, but they didn't really make them these powerful. You got to see Drogon burn stuff down, but I don't
At
know.
the very end,
Well,
basically, when he burns down King's
and I
Landing.
want to see them be intelligent too. They've really had them just be animals. They're supposed to be super intelligent
Well,
beings.
that's what I would like too. I prefer the bond. One thing that was nice was Danny had the bond with their dragons, and I
Yes.
haven't seen any scenes with them with their dragons so far, like as their
Yeah.
companions, because those were her children.
Well, because you have the girl, she's riding it like, how a rich girl would go ride her horse. She's
Yeah.
going out riding her dragon and like at the stable.
Um. But having said all that, like the having the opening with the music and everything, but like everything with Viserys and his character, um, the scene at the bridge, which I thought was very good. Oh,
Stop.
the scene at the bridge, which I thought was very good, and then the end scene, which I thought was fantastic. Like
Yeah.
I thought that the conversation those two have, the acting between those two, um, it's hard to say. I think the first episode was more kind of entertaining and exciting in ways, just kind of visually and everything and what was happening. But this episode, I think was more in spirit of kind of like what I want out of a Game of Thrones kind of show.
Well, I don't know. I just need things to start happening because when I think of, the dragons, I still kind of go back to like, yeah, they should be fire. They have them being too proper. Let me see him
Yeah, I need to see a dragon burning some shit down.
be a little aggressive. That's what I'm looking for.
All right, our cat won't shut up, so we're gonna have to stop
Yeah.
recording here. We will be recording for episode 3. I don't know the name of that one. Um, but so far, right, we still like the show.
Yeah. I mean, I still enjoy watching it. It's just there are certain things I'm kinda I guess I'm trying to poke holes in them, but they could still clear it up.
Well, my issue is I would say is that I think it's a very competent show, but I think it could have been great. And that doesn't mean it won't
Yes.
get there. But as of right now, I think they're they just
They're feeling things out for
yeah,
sure.
it feels trepidatious.
Yes.
But I just wish they would kind of just like figure the show out and kind of what it is. And I still don't really think they've totally figured it out. And I don't want to keep always saying, "Oh, this is reminding me of Game of Thrones." I would like at some point to say, "Hey, this is a cool thing I haven't really seen before," which I think the crab thing was. I don't think Game of Thrones ever they had the Skull King guy that was beyond the wall, but the Texas Chainsaw Massacre kind of imagery, the horror stuff,
Yeah, it was very scary.
I would I like that. Um, and honestly, I don't be this way. Damon not being in this episode a lot, I think
Heard
is
it.
one reason it felt slow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Damon's kind of the show right now. I mean, it was obvious because Matt Smith's like he was Doctor Who, and a lot
Oh,
of people were
he owns every scene he's in.
yeah, he's definitely the character that
Him and the king, they really
yeah, as of right now. But
yes.
I think Otto's very important because we need like a villain.
Yeah, you always have to have a bad guy.
Because if Damon would have nobody to hate.
Damon's just the complex character, you know?
Yes. But, right now, yeah, I'm hoping episode 3 because this one was called The Rogue Prince. I thought Damon was gonna be in it more, and he's only in, like, 2 scenes. So I'm hoping next week we get more Damon, and I'm curious to see what happens with the time jump. But, yeah, as of right now, this is better than Game of Thrones season 7 and season 8.
Yes, nice.
So,
High bars you set there.
yeah, so there's something to be said there. Well, it kind of feels like watching the show again in, like, season 5 when it had dropped in quality quite a bit.
Yeah, but that's okay when you're at a building phase, not on the decline.
Yeah, that was the thing. So if this hopefully this starts like Game of Thrones season 5 and then like later on we're like to Game of Thrones season 3 of
Yeah.
that, and then we're like, "Hey, it just gets better as it goes along,
Well,
you know."
like you said, hopefully we just get away from the Game of Thrones thing altogether and it takes on its own entity.
I mean, them reusing the music makes me think
I
that is
know.
not happening at
I know.
all.
Pipe dream.
There was their chance to be like, "Let's do a new theme and do a new thing altogether," and like
I really thought they were going
but
to.
so far I will say this, I like this better than like the Star Wars prequels and the Hobbit movies and all that stuff. I think this is and Harry Potter, Fantastic Beasts. I think this is right
Yeah,
now better. Although the first Fantastic Beasts movie is an okay
it was
movie.
cute.
But right now this is probably the best prequel of those things so far.
Yeah,
Because it's still a lot of the issues we have is the prequel thing because like there's no surprise,
right.
which is the problem with prequels. But I think it's its own thing. They've done a good job.